My name is Aisha, and this incident took place about 8 years ago when I was 22 years old. My marriage was arranged under a family decision in which my own wishes had the smallest share. In our household, it was always believed that a girl's happiness lies not in her own choices, but in the approval of her elders, and if she silently lowers her head, that is considered her good upbringing and wisdom. I never openly rebelled against my family. But inside my heart, there was a silent resistance that perhaps no one could see. I was married to my cousin Zubair, and this relationship was decided on the surface in the name of keeping it within the family. But the truth was that behind this marriage, there was not just love or goodwill, but also some bitterness and jealousy of which I had no full understanding at the time. Zubair was not a bad person. At least in the beginning, that is what I thought. But the atmosphere of his house, especially the behavior of his mother and his paternal aunt, made me feel from the very start that I had entered a house where the door was opened for me, but no space was made for me in their hearts. Even before the marriage, a strange tension was felt in every meeting. Zubair's mother would smile when she saw me, but her eyes did not have that acceptance which a new daughter-in-law deserves. His elder sister, who often lived in their house and whom everyone called Badi Fuppo, elder paternal aunt, would look at me unusually closely from the very first day, as if she was not assessing my clothes, my walk, my way of speaking, or my face, but something else entirely. Many times when I would sit in front of her, she would suddenly fall silent while talking. She would look at me for a long time. Then she would turn her face away and start whispering something under her breath or rapidly turn the beads of her rosary. I had mentioned this to my mother the first time I noticed it, but she only said, "You are going to a new place. Do not take everything to heart. Elders are like that." Perhaps if the matter had only been this, I would have ignored it, thinking it was just my own nervousness. But a few days before the wedding, my dreams began to change. About 10 days before the wedding, I saw a dream in which I was standing in a very long, deserted, dimly lit corridor, dressed as a bride. There was henna on my hands. I was wearing jewelry. But the strange thing was that my feet were bare and there was no person around me. Yet in the distance, the sounds of drums, women's voices, and laughter could be heard. I wanted to move toward that sound, but in front of me was a closed wooden door that had scratch marks on the inside as if someone had dug their nails into it. And the closer I went to it, the clearer it became that behind the door, a woman was crying very softly. The dream did not end there. I placed my hand on the door in the dream, and from inside, a cold palm stopped exactly opposite my hand. Then a voice came, neither completely old nor young, but so cold and oppressive that I trembled even in the dream. It said, "This place is not for you." I woke up screaming. After that night, for many days, I did not dare to sleep with the lights off in my room. I told my mother about the dream. She gave charity, told me to recite the sacred verses, and the matter was dismissed. But a small scratch remained in my heart. The marriage ceremony took place. The rituals were completed, the guests left, photographs were taken, and I came to that house which I now had to call my home. This house was old, not very large, but with a strange construction from inside. Old-style architecture. An open courtyard in the middle, rooms around it, a long gallery, and at the back a closed-off area where old trunks, wooden furniture, and unused items were stored. At first glance, the house seemed simply old, but after sitting inside for a while, I began to feel a strange, heavy silence. The strange thing was that there were people present in the house. Conversations were happening. Tea was being made. The sounds of dishes could also be heard. But beneath all of this, there was such a persistent silence, as if the house was suppressing its real voice. My first night was there, and the truth is that like every bride, my heart had nervousness, hesitation, and an unknown fear of a new life. But besides all this, there was another feeling that I could not explain at that time. It felt as if I was not alone. Even though the room was closed, the door was locked from inside, and Zubair was present in front of me. That first night, I fell asleep very late, and when I did sleep, it was as if someone had forcefully pushed me into sleep. At some hour of the night, my eyes opened as if someone had come very close to my ear and softly taken my name. I immediately opened my eyes. There was a faint blue light in the room coming from a bulb outside the window. Zubair was sleeping next to me, but his sleep was very deep. I first told myself that it must have been a dream, but then I clearly felt that something was standing near my feet. I did not see any clear shape in the complete darkness, but the feeling was so strong, as if someone with a solid body was standing there, just watching. My entire body went numb. I tried to move, but it was as if my body had abandoned me for a few moments. Then, just as softly, a cold breeze moved from my feet upward, as if someone was passing by. I started reciting sacred verses in my heart. After a few seconds, the feeling became lighter. I immediately tried to wake Zubair, but he was sleeping as if in some deep heedlessness. In the morning, when I told him everything, he laughed. He said, "It's a new place, fatigue, and wedding stress. That's why you feel this way." I also silenced myself by saying the same thing, but despite the night ending, that feeling had not ended. The next few days passed in rituals, relatives, coming and going, feasts and meetings. During the day, I kept myself busy, but as soon as evening came, the atmosphere of that house would begin to change. After the evening prayer, despite the lights in the courtyard, the corners would begin to seem dark. The gallery would feel long and cold, and the old items stored in the back would seem as if they were waiting for someone. There was also a strange, unspoken thing among the women of the house. My mother-in-law treated me with formal gentleness, but her tone never became openly affectionate. Batty Fuppa would often sit in a specific room after evening, the one where old cupboards and trunks were kept, and no one was allowed to go there. I asked Zubair once or twice what was in there. He brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "Old stuff, family heirlooms." But despite showing no interest, everyone seemed to stay a certain distance away from that place. It was not just a closed room. It was a separate territory inside the house, and I soon began to feel that the real story of this house revolved around it. 2 weeks after the wedding, for the first time, I felt something strange even in the daylight of this house. It was afternoon. Everyone had eaten and gone to their rooms. I was tidying the dishes in the kitchen. Suddenly, I felt as if a very faint sound of clothes dragging came from the gallery behind me. I thought perhaps my mother-in-law was coming, but when I turned to look, there was no one there. Still, I was certain that someone had just passed by, because a faint fragrance had remained in the air. The kind that comes somewhere between old perfume, a closed cupboard, and wet earth. In the evening, when I casually asked my sister-in-law what perfume Batty Fuppa wears, she immediately fell silent. After a few moments, she asked, "Why?" I made light of it, saying, "Just asking." But the fear that came into her eyes for a moment did not escape me. That same night, my sister-in-law came to my room and softly said, "Sister-in-law, if you feel something at night, don't call out its name. Just recite the sacred verses." I held her and asked why she was saying this, but she immediately changed the subject and left. That one sentence placed that fear in my heart, which made every subsequent night even heavier. After that, matters began to change rapidly. Now it was not just a feeling. Signs also began to appear. Many times at night, I would feel as if someone was sitting near my head, breathing slowly. One night, I clearly felt that someone had wrapped a strand of my hair around their finger and pulled it. I jolted awake. I turned on the light, but there was no one in the room. Zubair again said that perhaps my hair had gotten caught on a button or a pillow. But the next night, when the blanket began to slowly pull from the foot of the bed, and I saw that movement with my own eyes, my heart accepted for the first time that this was not just sleep, fatigue, or illusion. I woke Zubair forcefully this time. But as soon as he woke up, everything stopped. He said, irritated, that I was exaggerating things. For the first time, I felt in his tone not just impatience, but a strange annoyance, as if even mentioning my fear was prickling something hidden. Another thing I noticed was that, as my fear increased, the older women of the house began to watch me more closely. My mother-in-law's gaze began to change, and in Batty Fuppo's silence, there began to be a kind of victory that I cannot describe. One day, she pulled my palm toward herself, looked at it very carefully, and said, "Some girls are not made for every house." At that time, this sentence seemed like an ordinary taunt. But for the first time, I began to feel like a guest in this house rather than a daughter-in-law, and a guest that someone intended to send back soon. A month passed, and my condition began to change. I started sleeping less. Then I almost stopped sleeping altogether. My head would feel heavy during the day. My heart would feel restless for no reason. I could not focus in my prayers. And when I looked at my face in the mirror, I felt as if there was another shadow present beneath my eyes. My relationship with Zubair also began to suffer. He used to be soft-natured, but now he would become irritable over small things. Many times, we would fight over matters that had no real reason. Once, he himself admitted that he also had strange dreams at night. But the very next moment, he said that perhaps I was influencing his mind. Hearing this, I broke down, because I had begun to feel that in this house, there was not just an unseen thing, but also something that was increasing hatred, impatience, and distance between us. The real turning point came one night when I woke up around the time of the pre-dawn prayer. I did not know why my eyes suddenly opened, but as soon as they did, I felt that the door of the room was half open, even though I always closed it properly from inside. Beyond the door at the end of the gallery, there was a faint light, perhaps from the bulb in the courtyard. In that light, I saw the outline of a woman. She was not in white, not in black, but in clothes of a faded color. Her face was not clear, but she had a dupatta on her head, and her posture was as if a very old woman was standing straight. I thought perhaps it was Badi Fuppo, but then she slowly turned her head toward me, and I saw that which a person can never forget. This was not a living person. In place of her face was darkness, but in place of eyes were two such deep black voids that were fixed directly on me. Then she very slightly raised her hand, as if gesturing for me to come outside. I became frozen. No sound came from within me. Only from my tongue the sacred verses began to flow silently. As I kept reciting, that shape kept stepping back, but it did not disappear. It only became fainter and went to the farthest corner of the gallery, as if absorbed into the wall. After that, I sat awake until morning. The next day, I decided that now either I must know the truth or I must leave this house. I strongly insisted to Zubair that I had seen something, but instead of believing me, he became angry and said that I was trying to blame his family. That day, for the first time, a coldness arose in my heart toward him as well. In the evening, my sister-in-law secretly came to me, and perhaps for the first time, spoke the truth out of fear. She said that in this house, their grandmother's sister-in-law, meaning Zubair's grandfather's elder sister, used to live in the back section years ago. She had been married, but she had returned from her in-law's house. It was said that no one had accepted her there, so she came to live in her brother's house. But gradually, harshness, jealousy, and strange habits increased in her nature. People said that she did not like any new woman who came into the house. Her death was also not ordinary. She was found dead one night in that same back room, and for many days before dying, she kept repeating the same sentence. "This house is mine. No other woman will settle here." My sister-in-law also said that Badi Fuppo often mentions that woman and says, "She is still here, just not everyone can see her." Hearing this, the ground slipped from under my feet. But the story did not end here. A few days after my sister-in-law revealed the story of the old woman who had died in the back room, I began to notice things that I could no longer explain away as imagination or fear. The house, which had always felt heavy, now seemed to breathe on its own. Every creak of wood, every flicker of light, every shadow that stretched across the courtyard felt deliberate, as if something was watching and waiting. I started avoiding the back section of the house completely, but even from a distance, that area felt different. The air around it was colder, stiller, and sometimes, late at night, I would hear the faint sound of a wooden trunk opening and closing. When I asked my sister-in-law about it, she would go pale and change the subject. Zubair refused to discuss it at all. One afternoon, when the house was mostly empty, I found myself alone in the gallery. Badi Fuppo had gone to the market with my mother-in-law. Zubair was at work. My sister-in-law was in her room with the door closed. I was walking back from the kitchen when I noticed that the door to the back room was slightly ajar. It was always kept locked, but that day, the lock was hanging loose, as if someone had opened it recently and forgotten to close it properly. I knew I should not go near it. Every instinct told me to walk away. But something pulled at me, a terrible curiosity mixed with the desperate need to understand what was happening to me. I looked around. No one was watching. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. I pushed the door open slowly. It made a long, low creaking sound that seemed to travel through the entire house. Inside, the room was dark, lit only by a small, grimy window high up on the wall. Dust particles floated in the thin ray of light. The room smelled of old wood, mothballs, and something else, something stale and cold, like a grave that had been opened after many years. There were several old trunks stacked against one wall, their brass fittings tarnished black. A wooden cupboard with cracked glass doors stood in the corner. Inside it, I could see bundles of old clothes, their colors faded to gray and brown. In the center of the room, there was a low wooden stool, and on it, a rusted metal box. I walked toward the box. My hands were trembling. I did not want to open it, but I felt as if someone was pushing me from behind, urging me to see what was inside. I lifted the lid. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside the box, I found old photographs, their edges yellowed and curled. I picked up the top one. It showed a woman in old-fashioned clothes standing stiffly in front of a house. Her face was stern, her lips pressed together in a thin line. There was no smile. Her eyes were dark and hard, and even in the faded photograph, they seemed to stare directly at me. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faded ink, was a name. Kulsum, the old woman, the one who had died in this room. Beneath the photographs, there was a small leather pouch tied with a black thread. I did not touch it. I did not need to. Even from a distance, I could feel a wave of coldness emanating from it, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. I knew, with a certainty that frightened me more than anything else, that this pouch was not meant for protection. It was meant for harm. I closed the box, backed out of the room, and pulled the door shut. I was just turning to leave when I heard a sound behind me, a soft, dry chuckle, like wind through dead leaves. I spun around. The gallery was empty, but the door I had just closed was now open again, wider this time, as if inviting me back inside. I ran to my room and did not come out until I heard the others returning home. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over everything in my mind. The dream before the wedding, the whisper in my ear, the cold hands at my feet, the shadow woman in the gallery, and now the locked room with its strange pouch and the photograph of the woman with the hard eyes. I waited until Zubair was deeply asleep, then I quietly got out of bed. I went to the cupboard and took out a small copy of the Quran that my mother had given me as a wedding gift. I opened it to the chapter of the throne and began to read softly. As I read, the air in the room seemed to lighten. The shadows in the corners retreated. I felt a small measure of peace. But then, from the direction of the back room, I heard it again, that dry, soft chuckle. And this time it was followed by footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, moving from the back room into the gallery. I stopped reading. The footsteps stopped. I started reading again. The footsteps started again. It was as if something was playing with me, responding to my recitation, mocking it. I read louder. The footsteps came closer. I could feel something standing outside our door now. Not a person. A presence. Heavy, cold, suffocating. I kept reading, tears streaming down my face, until the first call for morning prayer echoed from the mosque down the street. The moment the adhan began, the presence vanished. The air returned to normal. The shadows lifted. I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, and slept until noon. When I woke up, my mother-in-law was standing at the door of my room, staring at me with an expression I could not read. She said, "You were shouting last night. The whole house heard you." I had no memory of shouting. I had been reading, yes, but silently, or so I thought. I asked her what I had shouted. She did not answer. She just turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the gallery. That afternoon, Batty Fuppo came to my room. She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand in hers. Her fingers were cold, much colder than they should have been on a warm day. She looked at my palm, tracing the lines with her thumbnail, and said, You have seen her, haven't you? The woman in the gallery. I pulled my hand back. Who is she? I asked. Batty Fuppo smiled. It was not a kind smile. She is the guardian of this house, she said. She has been here longer than any of us. She does not like strangers. She does not like new brides. But if you are patient, if you learn to live with her, she will not harm you. Learn to live with her, I repeated, incredulous. She comes to my room at night. She touches my hair. She whispers in my ear. Batty Fuppo shrugged. She tested every woman who came here. Some passed. Some did not. The ones who did not. They left. She stood up to go. At the door, she paused and added, Do not go into the back room again. That is her space. You have already angered her by opening the box. I wanted to ask how she knew I had opened the box, but she was already gone. That night, things got worse. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when I felt a weight settle on the foot of the bed. At first, I thought it was Zubair's leg, but he was lying still beside me, facing away. The weight shifted, moving slowly up the bed toward me. I could feel the mattress depress under invisible pressure, as if someone was crawling toward me on all fours. I squeezed my eyes shut and began to recite. The weight stopped. I heard a sigh close to my ear, and then a voice, the same cold voice from my dream before the wedding, whispered, You will never be happy here. You will never be a mother here. This house does not want you. I screamed. I screamed so loudly that I woke Zubair and the entire house. Lights came on. Doors opened. My mother-in-law rushed in, followed by my sister-in-law and Batty Fuppo. Zubair was angry. What is wrong with you? He demanded. You keep screaming over nothing. I pointed to the foot of the bed. There was something there. I felt it. I heard it. Batty Fuppo looked at the spot I was pointing to. Her eyes narrowed. She muttered something under her breath, then said, It was just a dream. Go back to sleep. But I saw the way she looked at my mother-in-law, a quick, knowing glance, and I understood that they both knew exactly what was happening. They just did not want to admit it. The next morning, I called my mother. I told her everything. She listened in silence, then said, I am coming to get you. But before she could arrive, something even more terrifying happened. It was late afternoon. I was alone in the house. Zubair was at work. My mother-in-law and Batty Fuppo had gone to visit a relative. My sister-in-law was in her room, but she had fallen asleep. I was sitting in the courtyard, trying to read the Quran, when I heard a sound from the back room. Not footsteps this time. A voice, clear and loud, as if someone was speaking directly into my ear from inches away. Leave this house. I dropped the Quran. I looked around. There was no one there. The voice came again, from a different direction now, as if the speaker was circling me. Leave, or you will never leave. I ran to my sister-in-law's room and shook her awake. She looked at my face and went pale. What happened? She asked. I told her about the voice. She covered her mouth with both hands. Then she said, Babhai, you should go back to your mother's house. Do not stay here. Why? I demanded. What do you know that you are not telling me? She hesitated, then spoke in a rush, as if she had been holding the words inside for too long. Batty Fuppo and my mother. They did something. Years ago, when the first bride came to this house after Kulsum died, she fell ill within months. She had to leave. Then the next bride, the same thing. They say the women in this house do not stay. They say it is because of Kulsum's curse. But Batty Fuppo once told me that they helped the curse. They did something to make sure no bride would stay, so that they would always be in control of this house. My blood ran cold. What did they do? She shook her head. I do not know exactly, but there is a pouch in the back room. Old things, they do something with it. They use it to keep the new women away. I thought of the leather pouch I had seen in the metal box, the one tied with black thread, the one that had radiated coldness even without being touched. That evening, when my mother-in-law and Batty Fuppo returned, I confronted them. I asked them directly about the pouch. I asked them about Kulsum. I asked them why every bride who came to this house had left. My mother-in-law's face hardened. You have been snooping where you should not have, she said. Batty Fuppo said nothing. She just stared at me with those cold, dark eyes, and slowly, deliberately, she began to turn the beads of her rosary. "You are not welcome here," she said finally. "You never were. The sooner you leave, the better for everyone." Zubair came home to find me packing my bag. He asked what was happening. I told him everything. He looked at his mother. He looked at his aunt. He looked at me. And then he did something that broke me more than anything else that had happened. He said, "You are imagining things. My mother and aunt would never do such things. You are trying to destroy my family." I stopped packing. I looked at him, this man I had married, and I realized that I was completely alone. There was no one in that house who would believe me. There was no one who would protect me. The shadow in the gallery was terrifying, but the coldness in my husband's eyes was worse. I finished packing in silence. I called my brother. He came within the hour. I walked out of that house without looking back. Behind me, I heard Baddie Fuppo's voice, soft and satisfied, saying something to my mother-in-law. I did not catch the words, but I heard the laughter. That night in my mother's house, I slept for the first time in weeks without fear. But the shadow had followed me. I woke up at midnight to find the blanket pulled to the foot of the bed. The window was open, even though I had closed it. And on the wall beside my bed, a single word had been scratched into the plaster. "Leave." After I returned to my mother's house, I thought I would finally find peace. But the shadow had followed me. The word "leave" scratched into the plaster beside my bed was proof that the thing in that house was not content to let me go so easily. I spent the first 3 days at my mother's house barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see the dark shape in the gallery, the hollow eyes, the raised hand gesturing for me to come outside. I would wake up gasping, my night clothes soaked with sweat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My mother was beside herself with worry. She made me drink warm milk with ground almonds before bed. She recited prayers over me. She burned incense and made me walk through the smoke, but nothing helped. The shadow would come, always at the same hour, always standing at the foot of my bed or in the corner of the room, watching. On the 4th night, I woke to find my younger sister standing at my door, her face pale. She whispered, "Appia, there is someone in the corridor. I saw her. An old woman in old-fashioned clothes." I sat up, my blood turned to ice. What did she do? "She just stood there," my sister said, her voice trembling. "She was looking toward your room, then she smiled and walked away." I got out of bed and went to the corridor. It was empty, but the air was cold, much colder than it should have been, and there was a faint smell, the same smell I had noticed in that back room. Old perfume, mothballs, and wet earth. That was the moment I knew. The thing had followed me. It was not tied to the house. It was tied to me. Or perhaps to the intention behind it, the jealousy, the black magic, the curse that had been nurtured in that house for years. The next morning, my father returned from a business trip. He was a quiet man, not given to emotional displays, but when he saw my face, the dark circles under my eyes, the weight I had lost, the way my hands trembled, his expression changed. He sat down across from me and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning. Do not leave anything out." I told him the dream before the wedding, the cold presence on my first night, the whispers, the shadow woman, the locked back room, the leather pouch tied with black thread, the conversation between my mother-in-law and Baddie Fuppo that I had overheard. "The work we did is having an effect. Let her stay a few more days. She will leave on her own." And finally, the fact that the shadow had followed me to my mother's house. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "This is not just a ghost. This is something that has been fed and strengthened over many years. Someone in that house knows exactly what they are doing." He called a religious scholar that same day, not one of those who claim to know the unseen for money, but an old man with a long white beard and kind, tired eyes. His name was Maulana Farouk. He had known our family for decades. He arrived in the evening, just before the sunset prayer. He asked me to describe everything I had seen and felt. He listened carefully, nodding occasionally. Then he asked to see the room where I had been sleeping. He walked around it slowly, reciting verses under his breath. He stopped at the wall where the word "leave" had been scratched. He touched the scratches with his fingertips. "This was not done by a spirit," he said. "This was done by a hand, a living hand. Someone came into this room while you were sleeping and did this." My blood ran cold, but my mother locks the doors at night. Maulana Farouk shook his head. "Locks can be opened. Keys can be copied. You have enemies, my child, not just in the unseen world, but in this one as well." He performed a ritual of recitation over water. He told me to drink some of it and sprinkle the rest around my room. He gave me a small copy of the Quran and told me to keep it under my pillow. He taught me specific verses to recite before sleeping and after waking. "The shadow will try to frighten you," he said, "but it has no real power over you. Its power comes from your fear. If you stop being afraid, it will weaken. And if you strengthen yourself with prayer and faith, it will eventually leave." That night I did as he instructed. I recited the verses. I sprinkled the water. I placed the Quran under my pillow, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking once. But the shadow had not gone. It was still there at the edges of my sleep, watching. I could feel it. The difference was that now I was not afraid. Or rather, I was afraid, but I refused to let the fear control me. I remembered what my mother had always said. The darkness can only touch you if you invite it in. Over the next few weeks, I healed, slowly like a wound closing from the inside. I started eating again. The color returned to my face. I began to laugh with my sisters to help my mother in the kitchen to live again. The shadow still came sometimes, but it stayed at a distance. It no longer touched my hair. It no longer whispered in my ear. It just watched and then faded away. Maulana Farouk visited a few more times. He told me that whatever had been in that house was a combination of three things: the restless spirit of a bitter woman who had died with unresolved anger, the black magic of living people who wanted to harm me, and the environment of jealousy and hatred that had been cultivated in that house for years. "Your mother-in-law and her sister-in-law," he said carefully, "they are not innocent. They may not have summoned the spirit themselves, but they have used it. They have fed it with their envy and their rituals. They have made it stronger, and they have directed it toward you." I asked him if the spirit would ever leave me alone. He said, "When you stop being a target of their envy, it will lose interest. But as long as they wish you harm, the effects may linger. Distance helps. Time helps. Faith helps." I never returned to that house. Not for my belongings, not for any reason. Zubair called a few times in the beginning. His voice was strange, distant, as if he was speaking from behind a curtain. He asked me to come back. He said that his mother and aunt had calmed down. He said that things would be different. I asked him one question. "Do you believe me? Do you believe that something was in that house? Do you believe that your mother and aunt did something to harm me?" He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "They are my mother and aunt. They would never." I did not let him finish. "That is your answer," I said, "and that is why I am not coming back." We spoke a few more times after that, but the conversations grew shorter and colder. Eventually, he stopped calling. A few months later, the divorce papers arrived. I signed them without hesitation. There was no sadness, only relief. My family supported me through everything. My mother held my hand. My father told me that my honor was not tied to a failed marriage. My sisters treated me exactly the same as before. I was not an outcast. I was not a burden. I was just their daughter, their sister, coming home to heal. Years passed. I did not marry again for a long time. I needed to rebuild myself from the inside. I went back to my studies. I found work. I learned to stand on my own feet, and slowly the shadow stopped visiting. I stopped waking up in the middle of the night. I stopped feeling cold hands on my skin. I stopped hearing whispers. One day, about 2 years after I left that house, my sister-in-law called me. She was crying. She told me that Batty Fuppo had died, not peacefully. She had fallen ill suddenly, and in her last days she had been screaming about a woman standing at the foot of her bed, a woman in old-fashioned clothes with hollow eyes. She kept saying, "She is here. She is angry. I did what you asked. Why are you angry with me?" My sister-in-law said. The night she died, the back room door opened on its own. The metal box was found open. The pouch was gone. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pity, just a quiet acceptance. The things we do to harm others eventually come back to us. That is not revenge. That is just how the world works. My mother-in-law, I heard, became very quiet after Batty Fuppo's death. She stopped going to the back room. She stopped talking about the old days. She spent most of her time sitting in the courtyard, staring at nothing. My sister-in-law said that sometimes, late at night, she could hear her mother crying alone in her room. Zubair remarried. I do not know if his second wife faced the same things I did. I do not ask. I do not want to know. That part of my life is closed, like a door I walked through and then shut behind me forever. Today I am married again, to a good man, a kind man. He knows my past. He knows what I went through. He does not ask me to forget, only to let him help me carry the memory. We have a daughter. When she was born, I held her in my arms and prayed that she would never know a house that did not want her. I prayed that she would always be valued, always be cherished, always be safe. The shadow never came to this house. Not once. Because there is no hatred here. No jealousy. No secret rituals in locked rooms. There is only love and the quiet hum of a family that actually cares for one another. I am telling this story today because I want every woman who hears it to know that you do not have to stay in a house that destroys you. You do not have to accept fear or coldness or cruelty as your fate. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to survive. And if you feel something in your house, something that should not be there, do not ignore it. Do not let anyone tell you that you are imagining things. Do not let anyone make you feel crazy for being afraid. Trust your instincts. They are stronger than you know. Also, know that there is protection in prayer. There is power in the words of God. And there is help in this world, sincere people who will believe you and support you. You just have to ask. As for the old woman named Kulsum, I do not know if she was ever real or if she was just a story that grew teeth over time. I do not know if she was a ghost or a jinn or something else entirely. What I know is that she was used. She was a weapon in the hands of jealous women who did not want to share their house. And perhaps, in the end, she turned on them too. That is the nature of such things. They do not stay loyal. They do not follow orders. They consume everything, including the ones who summoned them. I still recite the verses of protection every night. I still keep a copy of the Quran close to me when I sleep. Not because I am afraid anymore, but because I never want to forget. Fear taught me to be strong, and strength taught me to pray. If you liked this story, please like the video and leave a kind comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories of faith, fear, and survival. We will meet again, God willing, with another story. Until then, protect your heart, protect your home, and never forget that you are allowed to walk away from anything that hurts you.